When you do it really right, it's about preparation, imagination, concentration, relaxation, and you just fully imagine this thing, and then you really let go of everything, and you actually just trust, and you put yourself, because the camera loves spontaneity. It's actually what it eats alive.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Ethan Hawke is an actor. I sat down with him in his office in Brooklyn to talk about the work.
I know it depends on the role, but do you have a typical way that you begin your preparation process?
In a good situation, the initial process usually starts before I'm alone in the room, meaning when I read a script, there's either a moment that happens or doesn't happen. And the moment is, acting is an interpretive art, and at its absolute essence, what I feel is it's kind of the feeling you have in a room when you read something beautiful and you want to share it with a friend. You want to say like, oh, I read this E. Cummings poem and you gotta hear this line. You know that feeling you have, or you hear a great rock song and you're like, did you hear that lyric? If you see something beautiful and you want to say, hey guys, look at that. Do you see that bird over there? That feeling is what you're supposed to have about a script, where, you know, you read Hamlet and you go, no, you gotta hear this line. Listen to this line. Let me tell you why it's important. I remember having a friend break down, I don't even remember the record now. It might have been side B of Abbey Road or something, really explaining to me, wow, listen to this, and here's what comes in, and then all the sound fades out, and then there's crickets, and you hear this, and they really break it down for you, and then you listen to it differently, and you really hear what the production is doing, and you really hear like, oh, now George Harrison comes in, Sun King, here comes the sun, wow, okay, and you don't ever listen to it the same again. And a good actor is doing that with the script. You know, when Jack Nicholson is doing One Flew the Cuckoo's Nest, he is explaining to you why R.P. McMurphy is a freaking fascinating dude that you need to pay attention to. And when he bends his eye to Billy, that eye and that gaze is powerful. When he reacts to Nurse Ratched, you know, I mean, that's at its core. And so what I'm trying to say is, usually there's something, and sometimes it's actually only one line. I've had this happen to me over and over again where the script is okay, but there's one moment in it that I've never seen before, or I think is like, fuck, that's a great idea. What if more things could work? And then you start, and then you've begun working on, sometimes I've done a movie that, I remember I had this experience once where I really just hated a script so much. I felt like I had to tell the director. This part. It's not that I hated the script, it's that I hated the character. And it was a female director, and I thought that she was doing exactly what men do to women. You know, and I wanted to explain it to her. But in explaining it to her, I realized I'd fallen in love with this character, and that I really wanted to play it. And the work on the character had actually already even started. When I'm alone in my room, the first thing I do is write down the lines myself.
Actually write them down?
Yeah, I've got 10,000 notebooks in here I start writing them down in my own handwriting, and so they start to feel like a journal entry, and they have a kind of privacy of a journal entry. And you start to get confused with what's a line you made up and what's a line that somebody wrote, and you start breaking down the idea that, well, I just distracted myself because one of the worst things that happened to movies in my mind has happened there's a lot of little progressions that have hurt acting. You know, like for example, editing has become a lot easier, and so people over edit, right? Like, because you have these machines, and they don't let takes sit, and they just not. Even if you look at a Peck and Paul movie with tons of cuts. All the cuts are super deliberate because it was really hard to actually do. You had to tape the damn thing back together and cut it, and if you made a mistake. And likewise, there's this thing that happens now on film sets where they print out the script really small, and every day you get your sides, and they give the sides. And it's kind of nice for the crew because they don't have to carry a big script around. They can just see what today's work is. But it's now this thing that the actors get the sides, and they carry around the sides with them. And sometimes when I watch movies, I can see the sides in the actor's pants pocket, or a normal person might not notice them, but I can tell, oh, that's his sides in there. And I can see it in their imagination too, because they haven't really internalized the work, that they're learning lines. And when you're learning lines, you kind of lost, I remember Denzel once in Magnificent Seven had a funny little moment with a day player. Just he's supposed to be buying a ticket or, ordering lunch or something in the movie. And, for example, the line might be, "How are you?" And the guy who was running the ticket shop says, "Fine, thanks." And Denzel walked up and said, "Good morning." He went, "Fine, thanks." And Denzel gave this guy a dressing down. This is about he's like, "I know you're a day player, but you're an actor and you're in the scene with me, and we are listening and talking to each other. So if I say good morning, you don't say fine, thanks. You say good morning, or you say it's not a nice morning. Just I know you worked in your lines in the mirror, but you got to be in the present moment." Over and over again, with the best acting, you find it's the cliche thing you always hear, but it's about not acting.
Right.
When I was working with Ben Dickey, who's really a musician on Blaze, and really trying to walk him through the process of acting, it's really, when you do it really right, it's about preparation, imagination, concentration, relaxation, and you just fully imagine this thing, and then you really let go of everything, and you actually just trust, and you put yourself, because the camera loves spontaneity. It's actually what it eats alive. My joke, I'm doing a play with Paul Dano right now, and my joke with him is that whenever we think we're good, you can be sure that we're not. It's that, like, every time in my life when I think I've done a great scene in a movie, that scene is invariably cut out. Because, and I learned this, is that it means that I was self-conscious. If you have a strong opinion, it means even if you're being too hard on yourself or too positive with yourself, it means you have, you're self-conscious. The dream state is when you're in a place of no consciousness, where you have no opinion about whether you're doing is good or bad. Right. You're doing it. And that's usually when you're doing good work. I do think that one of the things I was just talking to my wife about young people, and sometimes really undervalue the simple experience of meeting and spending time with other people, older people. I mean, like, for example, when I was about 19, I did a tiny part in a movie with Jeremy Irons, but just being near Jeremy and listening to Jeremy talk about his work was so revealing to me in ways. I'll give you an example. Like, I was I was basically an extra in this movie. I had a couple scenes, I guess, but I was a kid in a classroom, and Jeremy was talking about the power of doing off camera, and how you often will hear this about good actors are there for their off camera or not there. Some people aren't. Jeremy would say that what I'm playing is what I'm seeing. And, I have to do some imaginative work to be this character and be in the situation. But if my performance is your performance, and that if you aren't there for me, then I have to act your part too. And then I'm actually not free to respond. When a good performance is happening, it's like a series of dominoes falling. Everything is obvious because it was hit, and what is it going to do when it hits? Is fall over, and if your dominoes are in a row, something beautiful happens. And so that's why you have to do your off camera, is because it's your performance. Is because we're doing this together. And it's, I say that only because of how I wouldn't have thought it as a young person to just having this kind of tiny, not flashy part in a movie, a little art movie that was not seen by very many people, would have a permanent impact on me just by virtue of listening to Jeremy talk in depth about the way that he works.
Right, right.
And I do think, in response to what you said before about acting being taught in film schools, I just think it's so essential. And it's one of these funny, the first thing you started out by saying about being scared that you're going to direct an actor and send them on a wrong course is a very legitimate fear.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the worst performances I've ever given are when I end up being really overly directed. And sometimes it comes from a genuine, good-hearted person really wanting to help, but they actually end up getting in your psychic space in such a way that things become intellectual and they start breaking down. And I did this play with Bobby Cannavale, Wallace Shawn, Josh Hamilton, Parker Posey. It was Hurly Burly. We were the first major revival, New York revival, after the famous Mike Nichols production. Mm-hmm. And Mike Nichols and David Rabe had had a huge fight because Mike ended up having to cut scenes from the play that David didn't want to cut, but the play was too long. And what Mike came backstage, he came to see our production and he loved it. And he asked us all these questions about the director. And I remember Bobby Cannavale saying, the truth is, man, this director he didn't even do anything. He just watched us do it. It was really frustrating. We really all wanted to help. And Mike Nichols said, brilliant. That sometimes you kind of, one of the jobs of being a good director is to hang people out and let them swim.
Right.
Right. And by letting people swim, they make discoveries instead of you having all the discoveries. Right. Like a lot of great directors, sometimes you can even feel the movie's about them, not about the characters. Yeah. And so you're smart to be worried about obviously a great captain, a great director knows the right.
Right.
Or can prevent you from going wrong.
Right. And Ben Foster was on, and he had a great analogy for this. He said it's like the actor is going into a cave, and he's got the rope on him, and he's going in the dark, and the director has the rope, but the actor doesn't want them to be pulling because you're feeling around in there.
That's the perfect.
Isn't that
that's
a
the perfect
analogy?
Thing? Exactly. That's kind of what I mean. The times when I screw up is when the dude's pulling on it all the time. Then I can't even tell if I'm right side up or upside down.
Right.
Then you're in your head.
Right. It just, sometimes an analogy like that.
That's the perfect one.
Yeah. There is a story that you told about Sidney Lumet telling Philip Seymour Hoffman, I believe here you'd be bawling your eyes out here. And Phil said something like, yep, I'll be sure to do that on the day. And Sidney Lumet said,
Today's the day.
Let's rehearse it. And in that interview, when you told that story, you said something like the words, as if it's magic, meaning like as if there's something that magical is going to happen and we can't do it now because it'll ruin the magic. Now, the one word that has come up more than any other word in these interviews is magic. Now, there are so many actors that call this magical and think like this: magic, alchemy. It was refreshing to hear that from you, because your story was about how let's not be afraid of rehearsal. Mm-hmm. But that was Sidney Lumet. If you guys were directed by me in that movie, and I was a first-time director, Phil would have looked at me and said,
yeah, he wouldn't have done
it. You don't understand things here.
Well, Sidney Lumet has earned that, Richard Linklater has earned that. There's a certain, it's hard. Doing it the right way is hard. And a lot of times magic is used as a crutch. You know, you hear Dylan say this a lot. You know, is it magic to write, you know, darkness at the break of noon, shadows even the silver spoon? Like, well, in a way it's magic, but he also makes like 5 hours a day to songwrite. Yeah. You know, and I remember when Sidney's basic point to Phil was age old, which is we play as we practice. The idea that you're going to do it great on game day but not do it great at practice is relying so heavily on talent and this kind of talent myth. There's a real myth about talent that some of us are just born touched, you know. And I would venture to say that all of us are born touched. You know, it's how we work whatever that touch is. You know, I did this documentary called Seymour about Seymour Bernstein, a piano player, and he says something very beautiful, that all of us have a talent, and it is most exposed by what we love. When we are having a good time, when we're being with people that we love, when we're doing work that we enjoy, our love expands. And as our love expands, our consciousness expands, and more things we love, and our talent grows. You know, it's not Dionysus coming down with a magic wand. If you read Sidney's book, Making Movies, he talks about making movies like a quilt maker. I mean, he has no frills, you know. And if you look at the acting and the production, there's a shitload of magic in there. But he is of that believer, luck is the residue of design, you know. I mean, it's funny because I'll tell you a different Sidney Lumet story, which is fascinating, which is that another time with Phil, we're doing the end of the movie. It's a scene where Phil and I break into a drug dealer's apartment. We're supposed to knock him over, I guess shoot him, walk into the bedroom where the drugs are and see another guy who's shooting up, and Phil's supposed to kill him. And then we're supposed to open up the safe and do all this stuff. And Sidney walks us through what his idea is. His idea is that he's got 3 cameras and he really wants to have this intensity. Now, we had rehearsed it a long time ago, you know, back in rehearsal. But he's like, I want this to feel really raw, and I've got 3 cameras, and I'm gonna load the gun up with these blanks because it jacks everybody up. And you guys are gonna wrestle, and you're gonna shoot this guy twice, and you're gonna come in here, and you're gonna shoot through this pillow, and this pillow's gonna explode, and then here's the safe, and you guys are gonna do it, and are you ready? It's like, it's about 7:45 a.m. And he had this whole shot kind of planned out. I'm gonna go from this camera to this camera, and I've got one single on you, Ethan, one single on you, Phil. This tracking shot's gonna follow you, and we're just gonna do this, and we're gonna do it in one take. It won't be one take because there's 3 cameras, but I want to have accidents. You know, and which is a weird way of saying is what I want is I'm cultivating magic, right? And what happens is Phil goes up. It's very hard to shoot a blank in a gun, shoot a blank through it. It actually does. It's no matter what, you know it's not a real bullet, but he's pulling the trigger at a real dude who's like that, and it is it's weird what Sidney did. You know, you got a guy who's very overweight to be shooting up. You know, it's all very loaded for everybody in the room, what the movie's talking about, and self-hatred, and so Phil's got to put the pillow up and shoot this guy who looks a little bit like him, you know, in an exaggerated version of him. And it was very upsetting, and Phil kind of, I don't know, it might have been my fault. I don't know. We went up on our lines and we screwed up our lines, and Phil just starts saying, "Are we good? Are we good? Are we good?" And my yeah, I mean, my expression is like, how in the world could I answer this question? Are we good? Right? Because it wasn't the line, right? And also, what do you mean? We just murdered somebody, like, and so we do the take, and Phil's like, "Fuck! Oh, let's go again." And Sidney's like, "That's a wrap." You know. And Phil's like, no, hold on. And Sidney goes, sometimes you work, and sometimes there's magic, you know? And Phil's like, yeah, okay, great, well, you have that. Now let's do one where I get these lines right, because I do think it was my fault. I think you know, who knows whose fault it is. And Sidney was like, I'm telling you, you're never in a million years going to do it better than what just happened. And Phil said, it's like 8:15 in the morning. Is there any reason why we shouldn't do it?
Yeah.
And Sidney goes, well, I just wrapped the crew. If you want to go tell everybody they have to come back to work, you can, but I'm going to be on my way to the Hamptons. And so on one level, Sidney didn't believe in magic. On another level, he believed in it so much. And what he did by doing things like that is we were always on edge, because you never knew when you might only get one take. And it jacked the stakes up so high, because he came from live television and he came from a time period where a lot of young directors, they just like to shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot. You know, because film doesn't cost that much anymore. They're shooting on TV, it costs basically nothing. You know, everything else is what costs. But Sidney was very precious about when the camera was rolling. It was a sacred time. A little bit like maybe an old theater maestro felt about the proscenium of a stage. Like it's holy ground. And he didn't ever like to roll not deliberately. I mean, he wouldn't do, like nowadays, if we do a scene, it's you and I sitting here talking, and you shoot the whole scene in a 2-shot, and then they'd shoot the whole scene in a close-up, even if they knew they were only going to use the close-up for the last line. Sidney just would shoot the last line. And I remember Phil and I saying, well, I really want to do the whole scene to get that last line. And he'd go, okay, we'll do a late roll then. So you do the whole scene, sure, but he wouldn't start rolling until this line he wanted. He didn't want to waste any film. It's just an old rug maker's sensibility.
Right. And you know, John Ford used to do that because John Ford wasn't in the editing room, so he knew he wanted that line to be the close-up, and he didn't want any other choices for that shot.
That's the way that Sidney was too. Sidney would say this thing, he's like, you could never take the movie away from me.
Yeah.
There is no other cut of this movie.
Right.
I cut it in here already, and I shot it that way.
Right.
Like there's whole scenes of Before the Devil Knows You're Dead that are shot as a wide shot, and there was no coverage. That wasn't a decision made in the editing room. That was a decision made in rehearsal, and that's why it was so important to him that Phil cry in rehearsal if the character was supposed to cry, because he's already cutting the movie and how he's going to shoot it. So he needs to see the performance at level. It's just, whereas, you know, Alfonso Cuarón, or another great filmmaker, so would never work that way. Alfonso, I'd be on set with him, and I would say to him, why the fuck are we shooting so much? And he basically felt the filmmaking process was him developing the paint. He's even said this to me. It's like, this shot is like one can of paint, and this shot is another can of paint, and I'm going to paint the picture later. And I might want some red, so we do a whole thing where the scene's really angry, and he'd be like, and I might want some blue, and we do a scene where we kiss, or you know, as the actor, that's less fun, because the film is being made in the cutting room. Whereas with Sidney, the film was made in rehearsal, and we were a part of it. Linklater's the same way. You know, the film's basically made in rehearsal. You know, the rehearsal's the exciting part, the really creative part where anything can happen.
Just a quick note. At this moment, I hold up the book Notes on the Cinematograph by Robert Bresson.
Look what I have here. Okay.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Is that mine or yours?
It's mine.
This is yours?
You think I went in
I'm sure. I got 5 of these. Yeah.
You think I went to?
Yeah, I mean, no, Linklater gave me that when we started Before Sunrise.
I just heard, and that's why I pulled it off my shelf, because I just want to know. Paul Schrader sends you the script for First Reformed. You read it. But then he says, I'm going to lean in to my Robert Bresson fetish.
Right.
You know? And do you know what a recessive performance is? He asks you. And tell me how that's not paralyzing if you've read this book that you said Richard Linklater gave you notes on the cinematograph.
Well, Linklater and I had huge fights about that book. I mean, this book really upset me when I first read it.
Well, can I just read a line?
Yeah.
That I just pulled it off the shelf when I heard you say this, and I just opened it up. It is not a matter of acting simple or of acting inward, but of not acting at all.
At all, yeah.
I mean, but that's a nice thing in a way. Like, there's a whole theory, not acting, but he thought of actors as models. Like
his work suffers because of that. I mean, he's a genius, but there's something missing
absolutely
in his films, and
I agree with
that Bergman gets. And Bergman applied a lot of the same philosophy with giving the actor agency.
Yeah.
And so his films elevate in a way that I don't think. I'm a big Bresson fan, and I enjoy him as a thinker and as a.
Yes.
You enjoy him the way you might enjoy watching reading a Camus book or something like.
Right.
It's awesome, but
that's why I want to say, like,
but
Paul Schrader says, I'm gonna be making my Diary of a Country Priest angle film. To you, and talks to you about recessive performance. How does this not paralyze you
because I know he's hiring me. I mean, if he really wanted to go the Bressonian route, he would have hired a priest.
You're right.
And told him to walk from there to there, and he would have done that and that. But because he went to me, the thing that Bergman did is apply a lot of these principles with the theater troupe, with some of the greatest actors of his time, right? Liv Ullmann and Max von Sydow, and all these people are unbelievable performers, expressive, and they're artists. Max von Sydow, Liv Ullmann, they're brilliant theater artisans, right? And he applied all these principles of not doing with. It's the same. I mean, why Linklater and I fought about it because he gave me this book. I was like, dude, why are you giving me this book? This is like the actor hating manual. Right. And he said he blamed the translation a lot. That the translation of the word model.
Yeah.
If you think of the word model not as someone posing, but as subject, in the way that my job as the actor is to be the subject, to be worthy of Da Vinci painting. Like, you got to be Mona Lisa, man. You got to be her. You got to be fully rich and habited, or else there's nothing worth painting, right? And that was Linklater's take on what he meant by model, is like, I need to be R.P. McMurphy if you're Jack Nicholson, or I need to be Jesse. You need to be this guy so three-dimensionally that, like, for example, Julie once said to him, Linklater, in Julie Delpy, where we were rehearsing before summer, she was like, Rick, this movie's going to be so boring. All we do is sit around and talk. Like we got to write some jokes. Like, maybe we should, we need to hire a script writer. And Rick said, I've been rehearsing with you for a month, and I have not been bored for 1 minute in the room with you. If you can be as three-dimensional in front of the camera as you are right here, then this movie could be 10 hours long. And he said, and any audience that is interested in that movie can go fuck themselves, because I'm not making the movie for them. Anybody who's not interested in real people is not going to like this movie no matter how many jokes we punch it up with, right? And so the challenge was to actually be a Bressonian subject, meaning to use all your full powers as an actor, artist, to actually be the subject for the camera. And when you start thinking like that, then you start getting into the more where Winter Light intersects with Diary of a Country Priest. So that's where I felt like, okay, if Paul Schrader is coming to me with his transcendental style of film, it means he wants the acting to be more in the world of Winter Light. There's a thing there's nothing more irritating than watching somebody who thinks they're brilliant, And there is something wonderful about watching life, or it's like when to go with Dylan again, it's like when you hear bad poetry, you hear the author think, oh, isn't that a nice rhyme? When you hear great poetry, you know that it's like somebody's subconscious is flying. It's bigger than them. and they didn't think that was cute, or they didn't think they looked good from that angle, or they didn't think they were clever. They felt like, whoa, I can't believe I wrote that. Mm-hmm. Like that has that feeling to it. Tom Stoppard had this great thing. He's like, whenever you're thinking, aren't I clever? That's when you know you're doing bad writing. It's the same thing that I'm saying about the acting. Yeah. Whenever you're thinking, God, I can't believe when I started this, I mentioned a red shoe, and at the end, the character came in with 2 red shoes, and then it all made perfect sense, and I didn't even mean to do that. When that happens, Stoppard was saying, that's when you know that you're in the pocket, because somehow your unconscious has started flowing.
You're doing True West now. You're doing it tonight, right?
Yeah.
What ideally has to happen the rest of the day? Can you walk me through it? What happens? What do you need before curtain?
Everybody's different, but the problem with doing a play is it eats at you all day. I start thinking about the second I wake up. You know, I'm worried about the heat right now. Like, I don't want to be cold, just like you do, because of my voice.
Yeah.
And so I'm worried about that. It's just the anxiety. It just permeates everything. I'll finish this interview, and I'll finish planning my son's birthday, and then I'll go to rehearsal at 1, and I'll try not to talk for an hour, and then I'll rehearse, and then I'll have a break from 5 to 7, in which for everybody it's different, but it's whatever brings maximum focus. And it's almost like having a game. It's like, you might need a nap, and you need to like do whatever your version of meditation is. I need to make sure I'll go over everything I got wrong last night. You know, I'll look through the script and I'll say, I didn't like that. That was fake. That was crap. Why did I do that? Or I've got to talk to Paul about if this could happen, this would go better. We're going through a process right now of like not getting seduced by laughter, because the laughter is, it's just your whole body loves to make people laugh, but sometimes it can throw off the energy of the story. You know, there's a great Cassavetes story about opening night. Like the first time he screened opening night, they got a standing ovation, and he was like, well, I fucked this whole movie up, because that's not the reaction I wanted. And I know that the reaction Shepard wants is not like guffaws of laughter. You know, I mean, yeah, it's funny, but it's funny, and it's dark, and it's powerful, and it's about family and identity, and it needs, more important than people jumping to their feet going, oh, that was so fun, is them walking away thinking about what Sam wants them to be thinking about, you know. So I like to play music, you know, to warm up my voice, and I like to listen to music. And I really like, the dressing room is some kind of weird sacred space. You know, for me, I watched Phil Hoffman play this part, and I realized that was kind of a demon for me, of ways of like, I just loving Malkovich and Phil so much. 2 people played lead at a really high level. So basically I invite them to join me rather than to make them like enemies, like, or try to like, I've invited them to participate. So
that's such a good way of not being paralyzed by the legendary performances.
That's what I invite their help. You know, I know that Phil would want me to do my best, and then if I think about it from Phil's point of view, then I know I should probably work harder on my lines, and I know I shouldn't care about the laughs. And you start getting like, hey, he actually can help me. I don't need to be scared of him. And you know, and if you think about Malkovich, and you remember to have wit. You know, the thing about Malkovich at his best is that, you know, he's just the opposite of self-serious. He's just so witty. You know, and that's true of Sam Shepard too. Bad Sam Shepard is guys machoing it up, and good Sam Shepard is when the actors in the company realize how funny Sam was. I mean, he's just really funny and really insightful, and lots of people can be macho, and Sam was so much more than that. And he was macho, but it did not define him. It's like, you know, there's a picture down on the wall down there of one of my favorite photos is Sam Shepard, and Bob Dylan and Allen Ginsberg at Kerouac's grave, you know? And it's just like, because it lets you know where Sam is coming from. You know, this whole macho thing is something that was kind of put up. It's very, I think, almost totally unique in the history of any kind of contemporary playwriting to have a card-carrying genius with that kind of movie star charisma. But that charisma started to over-define the work. It has a posture and a pose to it. Whereas I kind of like the pre-Right Stuff Sam Shepard is, and this is not Sam the man, I'm talking about what people put on him. You know, what people projected on him. But the kind of punk rocker, Village Voice dude who was hanging out with Allen Ginsberg and Patti Smith, it's important to remember, you know, one of his best friends was Joseph Chaikin, you know, total radical, you know, it was performance art, group theater, crazy, wild, weird, you know, full of transvestites and weirdos, and they were screwing with society. And Sam was a part of that. And so that whole leather jacket, tough guy, horse thing, which was another aspect of his personality, but that wasn't all of it.
Ethan Hawke, thank you.
Thank you, man.
I need more time. Can we do
Well, we'll do it again.
Can we do a part 2?
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you, man.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of IFP, the Independent Filmmaker Project. It's produced by Spencer Rain. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.